dear and distinguished guests from abroad and from within the country, honorable members of INBA and other members of the legal fraternity, friends. On this day in 1949, we, the people of India, in our Constituent Assembly, resolved to adopt, enact, and give to ourselves the Constitution of Independent India. We have been celebrating this day every year as the Constitution Day. Since the Constitution is the basic law of the land and establishes the rule of law, we have also often called it the Law Day. The Government of India deserves to be complimented for declaring 26 November to be henceforth celebrated every year all over the country as the Constitution Day. The first 2 days of the winter session of Parliament, beginning today, are also scheduled to be specially devoted to discussing the achievements and the working of our Constitution. Friends, I have great pleasure in welcoming the Honorable Minister. Since the Honorable Minister is now present, I would repeat that the Government of India deserves to be complimented for declaring 26 November to be henceforth celebrated every year all over the country as the Constitution Day. The first 2 days of the winter session of Parliament, beginning today, are also scheduled to be especially devoted to discussing the achievements and the working of our Constitution. Friends, I would like to draw your attention to the words of wisdom and warning uttered on the floor of the House by the Chairman of the Drafting Committee, Baba Saheb Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and the President of the Constituent Assembly, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, on 25 and 26 November 1949. Dr. Ambedkar said, and I quote, "However good a constitution may be, it is sure to turn out bad because those who are called to work it happen to be a bad lot. However bad a constitution may be, it may turn out to be good if those called upon to work it happen to be a good lot. Who can say how the people of India and their parties will behave?" Unquote. Dr. Rajendra Prasad, in his concluding speech, said in almost the same vein, and I quote, "If the people who are elected are capable and men of character and integrity, they would be able to make the best even of a defective constitution. If they are lacking in these, the constitution cannot help the country. India needs today nothing more than a set of honest men of a strong character, men of vision, men who will not sacrifice the interests of the country at large for the sake of smaller groups and areas." Unquote. Friends, our Constituent Assembly consisted of some of the wisest men and women, distinguished lawyers, jurists, scholars, patriots, and freedom fighters. It accomplished the tremendous task of working out an acceptable constitution for a highly diverse and fragmented society with many divergent pulls and formidable problems. The Constitution was finally signed by members of the Constituent Assembly on 24 January 1950, which was the last day of the sitting of the Assembly. Our Constitution came into operation, and the largest ever sovereign democratic republic on earth was born on 26 January 1950. This day is therefore remembered as our Republic Day. Friends, little talked about, but one of the most valuable parts of our Constitution, Part 4A, Article 51A, which was added in 1977, lays down 11 fundamental duties of every citizen of India. Of these, the very first duty requires all of us to abide by the Constitution and respect its ideals and institutions. That is the very first fundamental duty of every citizen of India. Unfortunately, I beg to submit that there is terrible constitutional illiteracy in our country. Vast majority of our citizens are unaware of the Constitution and even more ignorant of any fundamental constitutional duties of citizenship. In such a scenario, how can we expect any understanding or appreciation of our Constitution and respect for its ideals and institutions? How many of us, even among the educated, have any idea or a comprehension of the ideals and institutions of the Constitution? Democracy and freedom demand eternal vigilance and active participation of the people in the processes of governance. We need to know what is the scheme of our Constitution, how it works, how we are governed, and what all are our constitutional rights and responsibilities. It is of the utmost importance that effective steps are taken on the highest priority basis to provide to all our people in different sections and at various levels adequate knowledge and understanding of our Constitution, its objectives, basic values, and the working of its institutions. Friends, I submit that the occasion of the Constitution Day should not become another ritual, but it should be turned into something of a movement for creating national awareness about our Constitution. The edifice of every Constitution is built on the plinth of the country's past. It represents the vision and values of its founding fathers and is based on the social, political, and economic ethos and the faith and aspirations of the people. It would be wrong to regard a country's constitution as an inert document. For Constitution is not only what is written in the text of its provisions. Constitution is a living organism of functioning institutions. It keeps constantly growing, evolving. Constitution making is a dynamic, continuous process. Every constitution gets newer and newer meanings and content from the manner in which and the people by whom it is worked. The amendments that are made, the potential and effects it acquires from how its provisions are interpreted by courts of the land, and the practices and conventions that grow around it in the actual process of its working. Friends, Constitution of a country lays down the basic structure of the political system under which the people are governed. It establishes the main organs of the state, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. It defines their powers, demarcates their responsibilities, and regulates their relationships with each other and with the people. In a federal polity, the Constitution inter alia also delimits and distributes powers between the state organs at the federal or union level on the one hand, and those at the level of the constituent units, states or provinces, etc., on the other. The Constitution of the country may also be described as the basic or foundational law which ordains the fundamentals of its polity, and on the altar of which all other laws and executive acts of the state are to be tested for their validity and legitimacy. The preamble embodies the fundamental values, the philosophy and the ethos on which our Constitution is based and built, and the aims which the founding fathers enjoined the polity to strive to achieve. These have been further elaborated in the chapters on fundamental rights, directive principles of state policy, and fundamental duties of citizens. Taken together, they really proclaim the fundamental values and constitute the foundational principles of our Constitution. The preambular values of sovereignty, democracy, republicanism, secularism, socialism, justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, and above all, dignity of the individual and unity and integrity of the nation are supposed to permeate the entire Constitution. Adult franchise, free and fair elections, distribution of powers between the Union and the states, etc., all flow from the preamble. During the last 65 years, friends, there have been as many as 100 constitutional amendments. On an average, our Constitution has been amended roughly every 7 months. Most recently, the 99th Amendment, providing for the National Judicial Appointments Commission for selection of judges for the Supreme Court and the High Courts, has been held unconstitutional by the Supreme Court on the ground of its being violative of what the Supreme Court calls the primacy of the judiciary in the matter of selection of judges and the independence of judiciary under the doctrine of basic structure or features invented by the judiciary itself as part of its creative jurisprudence. Friends, we have given to ourselves a democratic constitution with our variant of representative parliamentary democracy. There are some fundamental differences and departures from the British parliamentary system, and our constitution has several features of the US presidential system. India is a republic with an elected president as the head of the state, with all the executive power of the Union vesting in him or her. Our Constitution tries to adopt a middle path and bring about a synthesis between the US presidential system with judicial supremacy and the British model of sovereignty of Parliament. We have a written Constitution, and the powers, functions, and jurisdiction of each organ, including the judiciary, are clearly defined and delimited by the Constitution. There is no question of any organ being sovereign or supreme. Neither Parliament is sovereign nor the Supreme Court is supreme except in its own assigned sphere. We are governed by rule of law, and judicial review of legislation and administrative action is an essential part of rule of law. But our constitution makers, after a great deal of discussion and deliberation, decided not to accept the American due process of law clause and to dilute it by using the term in accordance with law. It is another matter that the Supreme Court, through its creative interpretation, again brought in the due process clause by the back door. Our Constitution discards the absolute judicial review of the US model and provides for only limited judicial review, thereby protecting the lawmaking and constituent powers of Parliament. The judiciary has the power to interpret and declare the law, but if it tries to arrogate to itself the powers of changing the law or the Constitution under the garb of interpreting it or protecting its primacy and assumption of arbitrary powers, the Constitution, it becomes unacceptable. If the apex court itself disregards the express words of the Constitution and delivers an unconstitutional verdict, constitutionalism and rule of law cannot survive. If the court disregards the constitutionally expressed clear will of Parliament and the executive responds by refusing to implement what it considers an unconstitutional verdict of the court, the results would be disastrous for our polity and for survival of any constitutionalism and rule of law. Friends, India's constitution has been variously described as quasi-federal, federal with a strong unitary or pro-central bias, federal in its structure but unitary in its spirit, federal in normal times but with possibilities of being converted into a purely unitary one during emergency, etc. The truth is that because it has both unitary and federal features, it is a mix. It needs to be underlined that the Constitution does not use the word federal or federation to describe Indian polity. Also, the concept in the Constitution is that of union of states and not of union state and of union-state relations. The term and the concept of the center, discarded by the founding fathers, unfortunately continues to be used as a hangover of the 1919 Government of India Act. There are several other myths about the provisions of our Constitution which call for a sustained effort to make constitutional literacy obligatory for all citizens. For example, all of us, including judges and advocates and university professors, continue to speak of impeachment of judges. Friends, there is no provision in the Constitution for impeachment of judges. Impeachment is reserved only for the President of India. For judges, the provision is for their removal according to the prescribed procedure. But this myth continues. This is only one example, there are many others. Friends, we are proud of our Constitution. It has proved to be the greatest force for national integration and protection of human rights. We can derive legitimate satisfaction from the fact that some temporary aberrations notwithstanding, and despite very difficult and turbulent times, we were able to work for such a long time of some 65 years, a fully democratic constitution in such a large and populous country with all its variety and diversity. Whatever problems we faced were sought to be resolved within the framework of the Constitution without its breaking down, getting abrogated or taken over by undemocratic forces. As many as 16 general elections for the largest electorate on earth have been successfully conducted under this Constitution. Also, there have been scores of other significant achievements under the Constitution. The last election to Lok Sabha, after a period of great instability and governance deficit, returned a clear, massive, and decisive mandate in favor of a party, an alliance, and a leader. This gave birth to a revolution of expectations. Nevertheless, there is a negative side also. The institution of Parliament is practically not functioning as it should. Houses get adjourned without transacting any business. Important bills get stalled for no reason without debate. The court seems to be rushing to fill the vacuum and arrogating to itself the roles of the executive and the legislature. Democratic polity, established by the Constitution, is under tremendous strain. Several distortions have crept in over long years. Criminalization of politics and politicization of crime continues. Role of money, muscle and mafia power and influence of casteism, communalism and corruption is still present a disturbing spectacle. Little seems to be done to bid goodbye to the colonial model of administration and to bring about clean, citizen-friendly governance. The tremendous disconnect between the politicians and the people poses a great threat to the system. In the political struggle for power, all principles of national interest are seen to be thrown to the winds, and efforts are being made by malevolent forces to render constitutional culture dysfunctional. Simultaneous reforms on various fronts, economic, administrative, judicial, parliamentary, educational, and others, are urgently called for. But the highest priority, in my humble opinion, needs to be accorded to electoral and political party reforms, for which the most essential prerequisite is widespread dissemination of constitutional education. Democracy, constitution, and the rule of law are very tender plants, and unless nursed with meticulous care, they need to wither away fast.